Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Autism's last Lunch and Learn of this series. I can see that we've got a lot of people joining in today, so please do pop in the chat where you're listening from. It'd be quite interesting to see where everybody's tuning in from. So thank you for joining me today. Just to let you all know, I am delivering this workshop from one of Beyond Autism's schools. So if you can hear a little bit of noise and feedback in the background, it's just our learners having a lot of fun, enjoying their Friday and enjoying the sun. So my name is Cynthia. I'm an outreach consultant for Beyond Autism. And today we're going to be having a presentation on exploring challenges associated with sleep. So we'll make a start and there will be time at the end, hopefully, for me to answer a couple of questions, So for the content today, what we will be covering is autism and sleep, how sleep affects your child, but I will also sort of be touching on how the effects of your child can also affect the parents and carers. And then we'll sort of speak on how to support sleep behaviorally and go through strategies and different steps. And then we'll finish off with a sleep toolkit and some general tips. So to start off with, if we're looking at not just sleep in autistic children, but sleep as a whole, Hanley did a piece of research and found that between 35 to 50% of young children struggle with sleep. Now that in itself is already quite a big number. We're looking at almost 50% of young children have difficulties with going to sleep. Now this increases to 63 to 73% for autistic children. For those of you that are feeling like you're going through it and it's a really tough time, you are not alone. There are so many families out there that, whether they have autistic children or not, that are going through some sort of challenge when it comes to sleep. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will have a couple of strategies for you to try. Common areas of need for sleep in autistic children. Again, with Hanley's piece of research, he identified these 5 common areas. And the first one is bedtime routine cooperation. So for example, that is refusing to brush teeth, put pajamas on. That might be having that back and forth of negotiations, 10 minutes on the TV, and then I'm going to brush my teeth, but then the 10 minutes comes round and then it's another 10 minutes, and having that sort of back and forth dialogue. It could also be sleep interfering behaviours. So we will speak about sleep interfering behaviours in a lot more detail later on. But that is a big common area of need, and what that might look like is wanting lots of cuddles, wanting a lot of attention, that the young child may not be seeking throughout the day, and just particularly when it comes to bedtime. Self-stimulatory behaviours, you might see an increase in those sorts of sensory seeking behaviours. Another common area of need is delayed sleep onset, and that just means taking a really long time to actually fall asleep. And that will look different for every child. For some children, it might be that they are in bed, they are laying down, but they're just sort of looking around. It might be sort of scripting, sort of playing with their bed and trying to fall asleep, but it's just taking a really long time. But it might also be sort of getting up and out of the bed, walking around the room to try and get themselves a little bit more tired to go to sleep. Another common area of need that you might see is night awakenings. So that's waking up, either it might be just once or multiple times within the night, and either seeking for an adult or just waking up and being in their room and then falling back asleep. And then the last common area of need might be early awakenings. So this is that 5 a.m., 4 a.m. wake up call, and they're ready to be up and to start their day. Now, it's not as separated as it's written down on this slide. There can be sort of overlaps, and some of these areas of need could become quite intertwined. So you might see, for example, a child sort of engaging in some parts of the bedtime routine, refusing to brush teeth with pajamas on, but when they eventually do, they then should take a while to fall asleep. They're struggling to fall asleep. And then when they do get asleep, you see some night awakenings. And then you can potentially see some early awakenings too. So a lot of these common areas of needs are quite layered together. And we'll be looking at sort of some strategies to kind of combat those different needs. How sleep can affect your child. So we'll be thinking about how it can affect your child in that moment, but also how it can affect your child overall in terms of day-to-day living. Now, here is where it's really important to mention that if your child is having a tricky time with sleep, there will also be impacts on the parents and carers. And just a caveat and a note for yourselves to think about your well-being, thinking about your mental health, and getting support where needed if you are yourself having a bit of a tricky time with finding time to support your child if they are having a tricky time with their sleep. So in 2013, Hanley identified that there are associations with higher levels of behaviours that challenge, self-symmetry behaviours, and task avoidance as an impact of sleep. So with behaviours that challenge, you might see that during that bedtime routine, an increase in behaviours that challenge, but you also might see that in day-to-day life and having that knock-on effect. So if your child has had a really tricky time to sleep the night before, the next day you might see an increase of behaviours that challenge, whether that's sort of task avoidance, throwing, hitting, whatever that may be, you might see a slight increase in that. You might also see self-symmetry behaviours, an increase in that. So that might be sort of hand movements, eye movements, pacing, or you might see sort of task avoidance, so avoiding tasks that might feel a bit too demanding for that child. That can then have sort of impacts on learning and being in a school environment. It might be sort of when it comes to lesson time, the child is finding it really hard to engage and might, again, engage behaviours that challenge, and that could include self-exiting or wanting to space to be alone. Sometimes for autistic children, we might introduce naps throughout the day, but we'll be sort of dynamically risk assessing because naps in the day might then interfere with naps in the evening, going to bed in the evening. So they, again, could be overlaps of what those impacts may look like. If we're thinking about ourselves, if we've had a rubbish night's sleep the night before, when we get to work in the morning, we might be a little bit more irritable. Our threshold and our tolerance might be a little bit lower. And there could be things in the environments that are triggers for us a little bit faster than they would be if we had had enough sleep. So there are these impacts, and it's really important for us to acknowledge that it will be really tough for the young child, and just acknowledging and being there for them during these really tricky periods. Now moving on to how we can support sleep behaviourally, we'll be going through some sort of useful strategies. Some of these strategies you may have tried previously, you may have found some successful and some really haven't worked, but it's just about sort of identifying and being really individualised with the child that you're supporting. So Hanley identified 5 steps that we will go through in a lot more detail. So these steps are: step 1 is to develop an ideal sleep schedule. Step 2 is to get a bedtime routine. Step 3 is to optimize bedroom conditions. Step 4 is to regularize sleep dependencies. And then step 5 is to address those sleep interfering behaviors. So for step 1, with developing an ideal sleep schedule, one thing that you might want to think about here is recognizing an age-appropriate sleep amounts. So having a think about what is a good enough amount of sleep. If you are sending your child to bed and they're in their room expected to sleep for 10, 11 hours, that might be a little bit too long, and it might be for that child a little bit unrealistic to have that expectation to sleep for that long. Here, it's also really important to think about the time of year. We are currently in summer. It doesn't get dark till 10. So thinking about what we can do environmentally, which we'll speak about a little bit later on as well. Again, initially scheduling bedtime slightly later than when your child fell asleep the previous night. And then what we can do there is gradually move the sleep phases a little bit earlier. So if they're falling asleep within 15 minutes, move the bedtime to 15 minutes earlier until you reach that desired bedtime goal, through thinking about what an appropriate sleep amount is. And if you're finding that it's not working, so we've tried 15 minutes increments and that's not working, thinking about how we can shift those timings to get to that desired goal. Step 2 is then thinking about the bedtime routine. So pre-bedtime routines should be completely individualized based on how easy and how hard a child finds an activity, and whether it's stimulating, relaxing, or whether it's their preference. Bedtime routines involve a lot of different steps, which I'll show you on the next slide. And we have a worksheet and a resource that can be sent to all of you if you think that it will be useful, of how we can kind of think about that bedtime routine and rank them in terms of what's stimulating and what's relaxing for the child. So here is the worksheet that I was referencing. So as you can see here on the left, we've got the different activities. So we've got taking a bath, washing hair, changing into pajamas, getting a drink, brushing teeth, using the toilet, singing quiet songs, reading, and other. So this would be individualized to the child. So if you have a worksheet like this, you can tick what occurs in that evening routine. So if you're supporting a child that doesn't like reading, then you can just put an X there because that's not something that is incorporated into the routine. Or if you've got something into the routine that really works, you can just note it down underneath other. And then now it's the adult's job to kind of assess if the activity is easy or hard for that child. So do they really enjoy water? Do they love taking a bath? If yes, then we can put that we know that that's actually quite easy for them and they really enjoy it. If not, and it's really tricky for them to have a bath or a shower, then we would put a H as a hard activity. So you would go through all these activities, or all the activities that are in a bedtime routine for that child, and just identify what is easy, what is hard, and essentially what that bedtime routine looks like. And then onto the next column, we have is the activity stimulating or relaxing. So for brushing teeth, for example, that's a lot of sensory movement in the mouth. So for some children, that's just that sensory overload, and that activity can then become overstimulating for the child. But on the other side, we've got some children, when they're brushing the teeth, they actually find it quite relaxing, having those movements within the mouth. So thinking about what is stimulating and what is relaxing. For the child, some activities might just make the child more alert and more excited. If reading is a really preferred activity, so when you read to that child, they then get overly excited and then they want another book and it's not actually relaxing. Thinking about what we can do there and how we can fit that into the bedtime routine. From that, we will then rank the activities in order of preference. So we know they really love taking a bath, that's highly preferred, that might be a 1. But then on the flip side, we might have using the toilet isn't an activity that they really enjoy, it's not preferred, so that might be less preferred. Once you've kind of gone through that, you want to schedule hard and stimulating activities earlier on in the schedule, and then have those easy and relaxing activities later on. You may want to even eliminate some activities from the schedule and place them earlier on in the day. So if having a bath is really tricky for that child, and that increases the likelihood of behaviours that challenge occurring, it might be that while having bath before our dinner, then they've got dinner and then they've got free play. So they've kind of got that hard task out the way. And when it gets to that bedtime routine, we can focus on the other activities and the other tasks. So here I've got an example of a completed worksheet, just for you to kind of see what that would look like. So we've got under occurs, we've got all the activities that take place. And under other, we've got playing with cars, watching iPads. These are typical activities in this particular child's evening routine. Then we've got E and H. We've identified what is easy for that child and what is hard. And then we've also paired that with if the activity is stimulating or relaxing. We've then finally, in this column, placed the activities in order of preferences of what's highly preferred and what's least preferred to help give us a bigger picture of where we're going to fit in the activities into this evening routine and schedule. We can use visuals to support with this. So using a visual schedule can help the child follow the pre-bedtime routine. They've got something to reference to. And a lot of the time we would like to encourage the child to have that autonomy and be in control of their evening routine. They know that they've got to take a bath, brush their teeth, and they get a bit of reading. Then it's getting into bed and they've got 5 minutes of iPad, whatever that may be. We want the child to take ownership of this schedule, and this can be a really good opportunity to reinforce them for following the schedule. So it might be that when they wake up in the morning, they get a highly preferred breakfast because they did really well the night before with the routine. Adding photos or pictures can help the child understand and follow what is happening. And predictability can also be really beneficial for the child. So they know that when it gets to 7 o'clock, this is the routine that I follow. It might be a really nice touch and a really good idea to have something printed out visually and have a big pen. So once the child has completed that activity, you hand them over the pen and then they can cross that off. So then again, goes back to letting the child take ownership of the schedule and trying to make it really fun and engaging for that child. This is an example of some of the visuals on the Beyond Autism website. On our resource hub, we do have lots of visuals that are downloadable. So if you want to kind of have a look on there after and pull some bits from there, feel free to do that. Step 3, we've got optimizing bedroom conditions. And these might be things that sometimes we kind of forget to think about because it's just we sort of can be limited in our capacity of the environment on what we can do. But just thinking about potentially cooling the temperatures in the room. If it's too hot, what you might see is the child feeling really uncomfortable and sort of moving covers away, pulling pillows out. Thinking about dimming or having indirect light. So dim the light gradually if possible. Again, going back to the point that I mentioned earlier, we are now in summer. So thinking about what type of curtains that are available in the child's bedroom. If we've got white curtains, then maybe thinking about swapping that out with something a little bit darker to kind of make that environment darker and dimmer to help understand the concept that it's evening and it's bedtime and we are now winding down. Putting away favourite toys, so it's not visible, so we've not got that temptation to want to sort of go and play and see other things in the room. Non-audible noises, so for example, thinking about not increasing the pitch or volume. So if the child is affected by changes in noises, having a consistent noise such as white noise, a fan, or an air purifier may help. So if you know, white noise is really popular at the moment, lots of families are using white noise. If you feel like that is going to help your child, having that in the background, because sometimes silence can be quite uncomfortable for autistic children. Just having something in the background to stimulate sleep there. And finally, it's important to take into account those sensory needs. So, for example, sensitivity around bedding and pajamas, and trialing different materials to find what fits best. So choosing between loose pajamas, tight pajamas, heavy duvet covers, light duvet covers, and really trying to figure out what works better for that child. A lot of the time, some of this will be trial and error when you're trying to sort of optimize those bedroom conditions. You might try something one night and it works, and then the next night it doesn't work. So here it might be useful to just make some notes if you've got a little diary of what the condition was that you tried in the bedroom, what worked, what didn't work, and kind of, you know, it might become a bit Tetrisy and trying to find all the pieces that fit, but just kind of working out what those conditions are for that child. Next, we have step 4, which is regular sleep dependencies. So Sleep with things that don't require you to be present to deliver them. So this might be also things that can be transported around, like having a preferred teddy or a favorite toy that is reinforcing for the child, but you don't actually need to be there to deliver that. Making sure it's really important that that toy, that activity can be available at bedtime and during the middle of the night. So it's not something that will need to be removed. It might be a favorite blanket as well. And then thinking about fading. So fading can be a useful strategy to help your child move away from sleep dependencies. For example, if you've got a child that wants the parent to be lying in the bed next to them, the parent could start off lying down, and then the next day we move to sitting up on the bed. So you're still there, you're still available, you're still providing that attention and that comfort, but you've slightly moved away from being lying down to being sat up. We can then move from there to lying half on the bed, to then sitting on the chair by the bed, and then moving the chair further away, etc. So figuring out a way to fade yourself. And if you reach a certain point and then sleep becomes too tricky from the child and we need to go back a few steps, don't feel worried to go back a couple of steps and then try again. That sort of very brief example that, trying to fade yourself out could take weeks, could take months, but it's just having that consistency and trying to sort of build that up and fade yourself away. Another mattress could also be used, and gradually moving that mattress further away from the bed and closer to the door. It may also be appropriate to introduce a full-size pillow or an alternative item to help them with the fading progress. So pregnancy pillows are really good because they're really long. So it kind of gives that feeling of somebody else being in the bed because it's really big and really round and something that the child can seek comfort with. Step 5 we have is addressing sleep interfering behaviours. So some of these behaviours may be leaving the bed constantly, crying or calling out, talking to oneself or scripting, or just playing in the bed or in the bedroom. What's important here for parents and carers is to try and work out what it is about these interfering behaviours that drives them. So what is reinforcing about these behaviours? Does your child want attention or interaction? Are they thirsty or hungry? Do they want access to particular toys or activities? Are they avoiding or escaping the dark room? Or if a room isn't dark enough? Or is it just automatically reinforcing, for example, those self-stimulatory behaviours? So again, here it would be a nice idea to have a diary and have those note-taking to try and see if the child is crying out and wanting attention from you. Is it that a particular adult that they want attention from, or is the room too dark and they don't like it and it's upsetting them? So taking some notes there and trying to see what that interfering behavior actually is. And once you've identified that, thinking about what strategy you can put into place. So for example, if the child is crying out for attention, then seeing where you can provide attention throughout the day, and then fading that attention into that evening routine. So it might be that you give them that bath time because they want attention from you during the night, and then fading that out. But we also need to think about the strategies that we're going to use once we've identified those sleep interfering behaviours. So these are some that was identified by Hanley. So we have extinction, and this would be a behaviour that you've previously reinforced, no longer reinforcing it. So completely putting that on extinction. So it might be at the moment if a child cries out, you go into the room and then you stay in the room with them until they fall asleep. Extinction would be we are not reinforcing the behaviour, and we also have that element of sort of crying it out. We have progressive waiting, which is building up the amount of time that you're going to check in on that child. So it could be at the moment you're checking in every 10 minutes, but then we're going to build it up and we're checking in every 12 minutes, every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes. And we want to build that time up. We then have time-based visiting, where this is a little bit more structured. So we're only visiting every 30 minutes. So progressive is we're, fading the amount of time we're going in. whereas time-based, it's happening at set times. We then have a bedtime pass. So it could be you give the child a bedtime pass, and then they can come and trade that in once for attention, and you go back in with them and resettle them. Or it could be that they have 3 bedtime passes and you go in at 3 different points in the sort of evening. We have quiet-based visiting. So this is where you kind of sneak in and creep in and kind of check. And this wouldn't be at a set time. This is sort of now and then, and just having that quite fluid. And then we have relocating relevant materials. So if in the bedroom, they've got all their favorite toys and access to their favorite things around, maybe removing those things during that sort of sleep and that bedtime. We have a quick question, and somebody has asked, what would you suggest if we try one of these strategies, but it doesn't work straight away? Really big thing here is consistency and kind of sticking it out. Things might not change straight away. You need time to kind of adjust and adapt to the strategy that you're using. And the child also needs time to adjust and adapt to what that strategy is. So the longer you are consistent with it, the more understanding you have of the strategy, and the child understands what is going on. You could use visuals again to support with that. So mummy or daddy will be back in 10 minutes, and we have a timer in the room. So they know that parents will be doing time-based visiting every 10 minutes, and then you can work on fading out that timer, and then just building that of you going in for 10 minutes. Then we can change that time-based visiting into progressive waiting, where we're building up that time. So my main piece of advice here will be just having that consistency. It's important to acknowledge nightmares. Nightmares occur if your child, to help your child develop good sleeping habits, you can avoid developmentally inappropriate TV, movies, magazines. Soothe your child's fears by listening to them and just showing them that you are in control, you are safe. Do not feel obligated to grant all requests. So keeping the lights on, checking for monsters, following repeated nightmares, if you feel like that is not actually benefiting the child and it's just increasing their anxieties, to constantly have conversations around nightmares. Help them with their anxieties during the day. So that might be that we are drawing monsters and we're scrunching them up and throwing them in the bin. We are brave and we are not scared, and implementing that into games. And then finally, you can sort of address those nighttime fears by teaching the child relaxation techniques and rewarding bravery in the morning. So if the child tells you in the morning that they were scared, but they stuck it out, giving them their favorite breakfast and maybe a sticker, or they get access to their favorite park or something throughout the day, the next day, to kind of reward that bravery. We have some resources available. So like I've been sort of briefly touching on, keeping a sleep diary is really useful to spot trends and patterns if you're a little bit unsure with what's going on and what those sleep interfering behaviours are. There are some ACT videos that you can access that give a little bit more insight into sleep and sort of solving problems with sleep. Have a look at the NHS website. There might be some sort of strategies there that you might find useful. And we also have a link here from Amazon to have a look at a Goodnight iPad book. So feel free to check these resources out and see if there's anything that you can use that might be a little bit helpful for you. We're sort of going to end with some general tips. Some daytime activities that you might find helpful is starting the routine a little bit earlier, just to give a little bit of time. And then, we can build that up and really find that optimal time that works better for the child. Exercising at least every other day and at least 4 hours before bed, kind of getting rid of that energy that's been built up throughout the day to increase tiredness. You might find it useful to avoid caffeinated drinks, especially after 4 p.m. or 6 hours before bed. Between the ages of 4 and over, avoid napping, particularly after 3 p.m. Only use bed for sleeping, not for playing and for social aspects if possible. And just work on following instructions during the day and rewarding following those 1 step, those 2 to 3 steps instructions throughout the day. Just some quick considerations is that if your child is struggling with sleep, please do speak to the doctor to see if there's anything that the NHS could provide. If your child is taking medication, getting some information on how that medication affects the sleep. Lots of autistic children are prescribed with melatonin to help fall asleep quicker and sleep for longer or wake up a few times in the night. It's a natural hormone that is produced in the brain. That might work for some children, but not all, so just being aware of that. Our bodies do produce more melatonin when it's dark and less when it's light. So it maintains our circadian rhythm when it helps to sort of control when we're falling asleep and how long we fall asleep for. But your doctor will be able to provide a lot more information about that. These are just some references. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. So like I said, this was our last session of our 23 to 24 series. Please keep out for updates for our series for the next academic year, and we will be sharing information closer to the time. If you have been following on with our series and joined a couple of lunch and learns, then thank you so much for participating. This has been our biggest and best lunch and learn series so far, and we do hope to see you again for our future ones. We have recently launched some new online training called Autism in the Early Years. And if you check that out today and use the code EARLY25, you can get a 25% discount if you sign up before Friday, the 26th of July. Just very quickly, if you have found this webinar useful, then please consider a small donation to help us continue running these lunch and learn sessions and being able to provide other resources for free for parents. So just scan the QR code if you do want to provide us with a donation. Other than that, thank you so much, and I hope to see you again soon.